What's going on, everyone? Great Talon here, and today the prey is going to be another retro review. Today it is Castlevania Bloodlines for the Sega Genesis. The year is 1897 and the Belmont clan is all but gone from the history books, and it is up to a distant descendant of the Belmont family to eradicate the forces of Dracula's horde once more when Dracula's niece resurrects her uncle after the First World War in 1917, in which the game takes place in. You take on the role of one of either two characters, either John Morris or Eric Lecard, and either you can crack your whip or thrust your lance to purge the forces of darkness once more in this 1994 entry into the Castlevania series, which was released on the Sega Genesis. Well, not the most notable of the Castlevania games, such as, Super Castlevania 4, Rondo of Blood, Symphony of the Night, even the first three Castlevanias in Simon's Quest, Dracula's Curse, and so on. I did find myself enjoying this title in certain sections. So how does it stack up against other prior games such as Castlevanias 1 through 4 that I've played and reviewed thus far? Well, it's not perfect, but it's still Castlevania. Let's see how this one does, shall we? Okay, and graphics and performance are up first here. You'll immediately have the sense of a familiarity here, as the 16-bit sprites are reminiscent of that of the Super Castlevania 4, but not as quite as ambitious as Super Castlevania 4 was in regards to heavily emphasized 3D environments within a 2D space. Now, don't get me wrong, at times Bloodlines does have some 3D spinning gears and such, but nothing as intricate and 3D spiraling as Super Castlevania 4. Because in Super Castlevania 4 you had the spinning, rotating maps and such, and spiraling platforms and all that good stuff. But the enemies and character models here are detailed enough, though, by utilizing the power of the Sega Genesis hardware to make out the little details on the character models, as well as some more vast, colorful environments and areas that portray, more lush visual experience than the previous games did thus far. In regards to colors and attention to details here, Bloodlines takes the trump card while sacrificing the lack of 3D-like models on the 2D surface. In regards to the performance, while playing on an emulator such as the Switch version I was playing on, the Anniversary Collection, I did not notice much slowdown or stuttering as much as the other 4 games I played were in the collection, which is a good thing and shows the games in the series progress and advancements that the hardware the game is releasing on is taking full advantage of. You also, like all the games here in the collection, have the option to apply various graphics filters, as well as traditional from the 4:3 ratio, or with scan lines, or you can do pixel perfect, which makes the game look more crisp and come to life in this day and age, or just play the whole thing in widescreen mode, 16:9 ratio, if you were so happen to be playing on an HD TV, or instead of a portable mode. Whichever your preference, though, the Castlevania collection has your back to provide the most versatile visual options for your gaming experience and convenience. Next up, we have gameplay and control. The gameplay is similar to a blend of Super Castlevania 4 in tandem with the older Castlevanias, like Dracula's Curse, seeing as though you can no longer whip in the freedom of 8 directions, unfortunately, for some odd design reason, but instead can whip left and right in either while standing or crouched, or you can jump and swing your whip diagonal left or right in the air, which for some reason when you jump you swing diagonal you whip, I guess, sure, why not? It's very unfortunate the 8 directional return did not make a return in this game, though, as I very much enjoyed that from Super Castlevania 4. But anyway, because it was really just liberating just to move in all directions and everything. But nevertheless, the game plays as it should for the most from time to time, from start to finish, with controlling whichever character you fancy feels crisp as well and precisely tweaked, just as it did in Super Castlevania 4. Throughout the game's 6 stages, you will encounter numerous familiar enemies, all pimped out in pretty 16-bit Genesis-like graphics and animations while attacking them with your primary weapon, but whether it be a lance or whip, in tandem with the return of Castlevania favorite sub-weapons such as axes, holy water, daggers, and boomerangs. Now, boomerangs this time around, folks, are the creme de la creme because you're going to need it. Boomerangs are the bee's knees. Now, what exactly do I mean by the bee's knees if you're not a senior citizen or a geriatric is that boomerangs in Bloodlines are super overpowered and can take down mini-bosses and even some bosses in seconds. I highly recommend finding it and never losing the boomerangs in this game at all, as you will need them throughout the course of the game to make your life easier. Just think of it as a pro tip if you should ever find yourself stuck and need some aid during one of the stages in the game. At the end of each chapter, you will encounter a boss as is tradition, and some of the boss fights are your standard business as usual fights which entail knowing when to duck or dodge or counter your obligatory Death, Frankenstein, Dracula appearance fights. Newcomer bosses though, like this freaking chain enemy, makes me want to fucking kill myself half the time. It just took me like 14 tries, no joke. There was also like a tower and golem, new bosses, and knights of armor and all that stuff. But anyway, lastly, this time around, it should be noted that instead of collecting hearts for ammunition and sub-weapons, you collect blue gems. I'm unsure why they decided to change the format this time around, but nevertheless, it's the same formula. As with the previous games, with the exception of Simon's Question, which hearts were actually currency but to buy permanent sub-weapons, which I actually preferred more than the traditional Castlevania games. But I'm probably in the minority there. Anyway, overall, the gameplay follows the mantra of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and it bodes most well for them in the end here. A bit about the story and the narrative. So, the story is a bit stretched out at this point in time, and may appear a bit convoluted as most Castlevania games make it. At this point, unless you read the manual or script or like the Wikipedia page states here, in 1897, the long war between humanity and Dracula has come to an end finally, and Dracula was laid to eternal rest by Quincy Morris, a distant descendant of the Belmont family. Peace was restored to Europe until the outbreak of the First World War, which transformed the continent into a dark world filled with massacre and violence. At the beginning of the war, in June 1914, at Sarajevo, the Crown Prince of Austria was assassinated. It was said that a strange, beautiful woman was involved within the shadows. The woman was Elizabeth Berkeley, who, in order to revive her uncle, Count Dracula, had conducted an unholy ceremony, which caused the war, giving her the possession of souls from Europe. So the game itself takes place in 1917. Characters are John Morris, this is descendant of the famed Belmont, and Morris families who obeyed his fate to vampires day and night, and Eric Lecard, whose girlfriend was transformed to a vampire when Elizabeth was revived. So after all this happened, I mean, it just goes on to say that pretty much that the niece is responsible for the murders and deaths, being the souls needed to resurrect Dracula. So the campaign itself will take you across Europe, as at this time all across Europe, as opposed to being stuck inside a castle, a little stuffy castle, which I rather enjoyed as it changed up the pace and monotony from most Castlevania games up until this point that they were most relied upon as revolving around a castle. This takes you all throughout Europe, which is cool. Okay, the sound here is, if I'm going to be quite honest, it's not, in contrast to comparison to the other first Castlevania games, it's not the greatest, and it's absolute kind of a bit shit. And it pains me to say that. I mean, the sound effects are all fine and dandy, but the music is way too low-key and obnoxious at times and ear-piercing, if I'm being quite honest. I mean, the ambient tunes are dumbed down, or at times when it's needed to be higher, and it's too high when it needs to be lower for whatever reason. And only once or twice they are apparent as you are playing the game, and it's not enough for me to get into my traditional Castlevania-esque groove, unfortunately. But most of the time, it's a low bass rhythm or high-pitched, sharp sound that's ear-piercing, and you have to really either crank it up or lower it down. And it's really annoying, and in comparison to the other games, to really even begin to comprehend and appreciate. If you can even muster appreciation for this score, I mean, more power to you. But to me, they kind of neutered it, and the once beloved score has now become something kind of esoteric and obnoxiously remixed on the soundtrack. Okay, now on to the replay value. The replay value for me is moderately low. For me, after I finished off the rather short 6 stages in the game, which only took me roughly about 4 hours, give or take, I found myself not caring or wanting to return to this game, as it was not honestly engaging to me enough to find myself yearning to continue to playing after, or even finding myself wanting to play down the line in the future. Super Castlevania 4 ruined me, folks, and that's that plain and simple. Now, for the overall score, is it worth your time? Castlevania Bloodlines is in no way, shape, or form a bad Castlevania game, which is why I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. I have played a bad Castlevania game, and one of them is called Curse of Darkness on the PS2. Let's just say it was no Lords of Shadow for a 3D Castlevania game, but that's another story for another day. If you're in the mood for a decent Castlevania romp and you've already played through the first 4 games in the series, it might be worth your time here. Just to run through it real quick, it might give Bloodlines a whirl. There are much more worse games out there to waste your time with, but Bloodlines is not one of them. It does the job fairly well from start to finish. It does not overstay its welcome at all, albeit some weird tunes and weird controlling design flaws, such as the ability not to whip in 8 directions. But anyway, that's my review of Castlevania Bloodlines. What'd you think? Like it, give it a thumbs up, why not subscribe? There'll be a ton of more retro reviews coming, as well as modern reviews and other lists as well. So with that being said, you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for stopping by.